a very unconventional 2020. But so let's talk about the season ahead. And I guess, I can give you these caveats along the way. And, we're going to ask some questions of Mitchell. We have you for the full period of time. We're here till a little before 1, because at 1 o'clock, and maybe this is part of the caveats we were talking about, Gino Auriemma is talking about the fact that the UConn women's basketball team is on pause for the next 2 weeks at least. And, the men's team was already on pause. And the hopeful part of this was maybe the women's team had found a way to be safe and avoid those kinds of dangers as well. And it hasn't happened. No one really knows. It's not, you can't sit here and say, geez, UConn must have been intentionally unsafe or ignoring protocols. There's no reason to think there's anything like that. These are people who took it very seriously, who are doing the best they can, but there's this great unknown about how you even stay safe in this moment. And so I was talking to Kelly Harper yesterday, the head coach at the University of Tennessee, and she was very excited about how the Lady Vols' first couple of games stacked up. And then 5 minutes after we got off the phone, the men's team was put on pause. Then Rick Barnes, the men's coach, had COVID-19. Later that day, the first game for the Lady Vols was canceled because the opponent, Florida A&M, opted out of the season. These are not typical in the midst of trying to figure out how to cover the sport. And so, my ridiculous all-star team of writers and fellow editors and social media all-stars like the great Jackie Powell, it's just amazing. They've rolled with things. They've managed to make this reality come home to all of you 24/7, 365. And I'm really proud of them. And it's a great emotional experience to work with them together. And we all share the same goal of creating this long-term home for women's basketball coverage. But to do it, if we could do it through this year, we could do it through anything. And so for all of you who have stayed with us and have supported us as we're doing it, it means just so much. I just don't know what to tell you other than just this faith about 2021 and beyond. That if we could do it here, we can do it this year. I don't mean to paraphrase the song New York, New York. But that's about where we are on things. So, Mitchell, let's talk a little ACC, because that is a very exciting conference to me for a multitude of reasons. And, Mitch writes this terrific column. Is full of news. He gives you the analysis in the background. He goes the extra mile on coverage. He's had those conversations. He's been there. He takes the photos. If you look at the captions, he does everything. He's working on the book. No, well, facts are facts, And so the ACC obviously has a significant number of the programs that are most intriguing to me. I think that Duke is the most interesting program out of all of them to me when I think about, I don't mean that likely to be the best, but I think most interesting in terms of where they are and what they're doing. What is your read so far on what you've seen out of Kara Lawson's group?
Yeah, I actually talked with Millie Goodchild last week. She's a junior guard from Australia, who last year kind of, didn't really get a lot, the shots that she probably should have. It was kind of overshadowed a bit by Haley Gurecki and Liana Odom, who, in their own right, great players, went on, to be drafted into the WNBA. It was kind of a crowded backcourt last year. So, I think this year, Kara Lawson's group, if you look at sort of what they lost to just on paper, Gurecki, Odom, Kyra Lambert transferred, they lost a lot of production. So I think on paper, they were picked to finish 11th by the head coaches in the ACC, 10th by the media. I think I was the only person that gave them a AP top 25 vote. And I think maybe I'm overvaluing Kara Lawson, but I just think she's, one of these great basketball minds that we have. And I think she's going to do some tremendous things. And I think on paper, like if anybody else is coaching this Duke team, maybe they do finish kind of near the bottom of the pack. But because it's Kara, I think there's potential there for her to elevate the team. And, you know, Melia was very excited to just take the court for her and to play for her. And, you know, was pretty excited about kind of the practices they've had, and just seemed like they had an overall good vibe going. The other thing is this is the first time we're really going to see Michaela Boykin 100% healthy. You know, when she was coming out of high school, she was, you know, definitely probably the best prospect in North Carolina, you know, one of the best prospects in the country probably. Since she's been at Duke, she's had, I think, 3 knee surgeries. She came back in the middle of last year and has had a good offseason. So we're finally going to see her at 100% and kind of see what she can do at the point guard spot. And she really gave Duke some good minutes and some good depth at guard last year, sort of down the stretch when they won, I think, you know, something like 11 of their last 14 games or something like that to finish the season pretty strong. And they finished 3rd in the ACC in the regular season, you know, had that second round loss in the ACC tournament, or maybe it was the quarterfinals. They received a bye. They lost their first game in the ACC tournament, but we're kind of on the bubble for the NCAAs. So yeah, I think, you know, when you kind of combine all that, they did bring in a strong freshman and Vanessa DeJesus, who is a top 100 recruit. So we're going to see her a bit. Yeah, I think there's potential for them to overachieve. So yeah, I think definitely intriguing would be the word that I would use. You know, they're not the best team in the ACC, but I don't think they'll be the worst either. They'll probably finish somewhere in the middle of the pack. But you know, if they can work their way up to, you know, 5th, 6th, 7th in the conference, I think that would be an accomplishment. And I think there's potential for them to rattle and maybe upset a couple teams along the way.
I mean, you know, what's interesting, too, is you talk about bringing in a top 100 recruit. You think about the timing of Kara coming in, and to have a top 100 recruit when you obviously were not in early or in at the even typical time on the process speaks really well, I think, of her ability to recruit. But to your larger point, you know, the thing that it reminded me of when you're talking about a coach's ability to elevate a program, no matter what, through the years, preseason AP puts Maryland top 15 in the country. They lost everybody, they're bringing everybody back, or somewhere in between. There's this idea that a Brenda Frese program has a floor that is pretty high. And that's my feeling about what Duke can be under Kara Lawson as well, is because given who she is and what she's capable of doing, we got to see it. You know, Minnesota brought in Lindsay Whalen, who is obviously a tremendous basketball mind. Similar situation, you know, without previous head coaching experience. And Minnesota's yet to do it. So we've got to see her do it. But Lord knows my respect for Kara Lawson and what she brings to the table certainly has me optimistic in the way that you're describing. You know, there's another program, though, in the ACC that I think there's a chance to be really special this year, and that's the University of North Carolina. And
I agree.
Courtney Banghart is another such coach where you just say, all right, this is someone, I mean, I just love the world of her and what she did at Princeton, where, again, Princeton was always excellent under Courtney Banghart. It's easy to think, you know, oh, well, it's a Bella Alarie thing. It's not a Bella Alarie thing. They were great before Bella. They went 30-0 to start the year, several years before Bella Alarie got there. I mean, you know, shout out Blake Dietrich, but I'm just saying Bella Alarie was the paradigm changer. Blake Dietrich is an incredible shooter and a terrific WNBA player. That's what Banghart's able to bring to now UNC, where she can bring in with regularity top 100 recruits. How good are they going to be this year in year 2 for her?
Yeah, I think it's easy to sort of just like look into the future for UNC because of the class that Banghart brought in this year and the class that she's bringing in at 21. Her 21 class is incredible, as I wrote about a couple weeks ago, number 2 in the nation. But this class that she has this year is pretty good too. You know, and it's sort of going to be, a lot different than what we saw last year. I think that UNC team last year overachieved in a lot of ways. They started the season really strong, and then that last half of the ACC calendar just sort of fell off a little bit.
What happened there, by the way? You were seeing it live. I'm watching it on TV. What do you think? Was it just them coming back to earth relative to their talent a little bit?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of they came back to earth relative to their talent, like you just said. I think, teams started to see, the Banghart team on tape a little bit. They were easier to plan for. The other thing is, Janelle Bailey and Malou Deshengde, they both were injured towards the end of the season. Janelle was on a minutes restriction, and I didn't know this until a couple weeks ago, but Malou was hurt as well. She, of course, is the niece of Dikembe Mutombo, and as a freshman led the ACC in offensive rebounding and had a pretty good shot as well. But Courtney said a few weeks ago when I talked to her that Malou kind of played the end of last season on an injury and had surgery this offseason. So, yeah, I think it was just a combination of that. They really didn't have a whole lot of depth. So, once the injury started to catch up with them, they especially didn't have hardly any depth in the front court. So I think once the injury started to catch up with them and people sort of saw them and figured them out, it was easy to kind of, defend them and take care of them towards the end of the season. Wake Forest beat them in the ACC tournament. But this year, with the healthy Janelle, with the healthy Malou, you have that strong front court. But your wings and your backcourt is all different. They got Petra from Illinois, who's a grad transfer who I believe led the Big Ten in three-point shooting percentage last season, over 40%. They got Stephanie Watts back, who, left the program just before Banghart came in, went to USC, was there last year. She got hurt. Things didn't really work out. She wanted to come back, so she's in the fold. And then I think you're going to see Deja Kelly spend a lot of time at point guard. She's the best recruit that Banghart got this year, a top 10 player. They've got a couple other players healthy. They've got a couple other players eligible. There's a few more freshmen on this team that are going to play heavy minutes. Anaya Poole is somebody that Banghart is really high on. Ariel Young is a transfer from Michigan who came in last year, who is now eligible to play. Jalen Murray is healthy. I just think this UNC team is just more talented and deeper than what they had last year. Alexandra Zelaya is the other freshman that Banghart is pretty high on, and I believe she's the one that she compared to Kylie Shook. So that's some pretty heavy praise there. She was the ACC Defensive Player of the Year last year. Zelaya is 6'4" from Arizona. So that's somebody to keep an eye on. And like I said, you still have Janelle Bailey and Malou, who are probably, talk about kind of front court tandems in the conference, two of the best for sure. Each game they kind of gave Alyssa Cunane some fits. That's who you want to, measure yourself against if you're a center or power forward in this conference. I think this
as the best WNBA prospect out of the ACC this year, or do you think it's Dana Evans, or do you think it's somebody else? Who is the best future WNBA player in that conference?
I think there's certainly a case for Dana Evans. There's probably certainly a case for Alyssa Cunane as well. With Alyssa, what I'm looking for this year is if her game is expanded. Can she, when she got the opportunity to last year, she was pretty good at shooting the three. She just didn't do it a ton. So I'm looking forward to seeing if she does take that shot more this year. The other one is Tiana, who is back this year after a year off of battling cancer. She said last week on a Zoom call that she's not quite 100% yet, but is working her way towards that, about 85, 95 or so. She said that, she really can't tell where she's at until she sees that live game action. So we're going to see that pretty soon. I think they're going to open their season up against Stony Brook, this weekend. So we'll see what she has. But this is somebody who, when she was healthy 2 years ago, was easily you can make the case that she was the best point guard in the country. Probably one of the most gifted passers we've ever seen in college basketball.
I mean, I just got to point out, and I've written about this, but, Tiana's assist percentage when in her first year with Syracuse was over 60%.
Yeah,
and
ridiculous.
no one's ever done that.
Right.
Only one other person's had an assist percentage over the last 5 years that's over 50%. And it was her in her second year at Syracuse. I mean, it's one thing, and I think this sometimes gets undervalued when somebody is elite to the point of a skill unlike any we've ever seen, where you just say, oh, she's a great passer, and you sort of check the box. That's not it. Nobody's done what she's done. And it wasn't that she was doing this on a super gifted offensive Syracuse team. Syracuse, if you could argue, I would argue, is going to have the most weapons they've had in Tiana's time at Syracuse this year. And so to see where that goes, even though she's talked about how she needs to be more selfish offensively and try to look for her own shot, and wants to take things from about 17 a game back in 2018, 2019, prior to missing last year, of course, fighting breast cancer. But she wants to get, north of 20, and that's what Coach Q wants for her as well. But she's also going to be surrounded like Emily Enschler, who was New York State Player of the Year her senior year in high school, and a tremendously talented player. She's transformed her body. Mm-hmm. She is somebody who struggled with conditioning issues out of high school in her freshman year. Syracuse could play her a handful of minutes at the time. She looks like a different person. And so to see what she's able to do, the skill set's never been in question. If she can be out there for 30 plus minutes a game doing Emily Enschler things, that's going to make Syracuse extremely dangerous. I think they have a real shot to win the conference, don't you?
I think so too. I think you could easily pencil them in to finish top three. It's not out of the question for them to win the ACC title, and even if we have a Final Four, to make the Final Four. Last week there was a Zoom call with Tiana and Kiara Lewis, and one of the players I asked them about was Camilla Cardoso, who is 6'7", a freshman, probably the front runner to win ACC Freshman of the Year. You could obviously make a case for Haley at Louisville, but she's somebody who I think Syracuse tweeted out a clip, the other day of her just easily, two-handed dunk, at the rim. So I'd like to see some lobs from Tiana to Camilla. That'd be great.
I expect you will.
But it's an extremely deep Syracuse team. They went, I think, game over 500 last year, but obviously that was without Tiana. But it really gave the chance, I think, for Emily and Kiara to sort of come into their own as players and a lot of time with the ball. So you now have them two with Tiana, with a couple other pieces, a really good freshman class. I think you could easily make the case that they could win the conference for sure. I think they're right up there with NC State and Louisville.
And Q knows how to get the max out of his team. I mean, they were, I think, a 4 seed the year they ended up going to the tournament final in 2016. I mean, they were not expected to make the run they did. So to see that happen, but, there's a larger point in what you just said that I think is so interesting, is you've got this player who's capable of just two-handed dunks and shows up on social media. We're not treating it like some sort of unicorn scenario anymore. The extent to which, and this has been a long time, the conversation about the gap between the men's and women's game is less about how far out you can shoot it, and it's whether there's this element of verticality to the game. And, whether you assign value to that or not is a different conversation, and how much that matters. There are people who I think make often a bad faith argument that is the determinative reason. Well, that's why I don't watch, and which I think is almost certainly garbage. But be that as it may,
right,
that argument, that tired, ridiculous argument, is disappearing, because as we see more and more more and more players in the women's game capable of doing these things, we're going to see the verticality continue to rise. And it's something that I don't think people realize just how quickly it will happen. but the more and more we're seeing the 6'5", 6'6", 6'7" players with another level of athleticism, the more we're seeing point guards who are looking for that because it becomes normalized. We're going to see that happen in the same way, and I've sort of made this macro argument about the women's game for a long time. You can almost always draw a line 40 or 50 years back to the men's game, to a similar point in the men's game, and see a similar point of evolution for how the men's game comes together, right? And so let's go back. I mean, we're 2020. We're going back to, say, 1970, 1975. David Thompson was very much the Fran Believe of the moment in the mid-1970s with NC State. And the fact that he was able to bring a level of verticality to the college basketball game made a difference in the same way that you can go back and Lou Alcindor, now Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, was a Brittany Griner figure in the game. And so again, over and over again, this is not, by the way, because women are somehow slower on the uptake. This is because when you look at who is being given the opportunities and the combination of, all right, the men's NCAA tournament starts in 1939. Well, the women's NCAA tournament starts in 1982. Men get this opportunity in college athletics in the 30s and 40s, and Title IX comes in 1972. So again, it goes back to, you get these opportunities, you put in the amount of time and money and energy and development, and suddenly there's equality. It doesn't take any more than that. And so I think it's, yes, wow. So if we're using my roughly 40 to 45 year timeline, we're about a decade or so away from the best player in the country in women's basketball being on Navy, and then delaying 2 years and then going to the WNBA. But yes, I mean, David Thompson. Oh, listen, when you guys get off of here today, if you haven't seen David Thompson highlights from the 1970s, I remember.
YouTube that.
Yeah, just so much fun when I discovered that along the way. So let's go, if we could. I may want to turn back to the ACC, and I know we run short on time, but I want to talk in a more technical way to Jackie Powell about the things that we're doing on on social media. And so I'll do by way of intro, because I didn't want to catch you by surprise, Jackie. But Jackie's been looking at various ways for us to reach our audience on social. And I want to talk about why it's important that it's Jackie doing it. Jackie's been with us since before the beginning. Jackie comes to us back from High Post Hoops, where she's been covering the Liberty, and she's done that at the Next for the entirety of our time there as well. So Jackie understands in a way that very few do our ethos, what we're trying to do, how we're trying to do it. Social media is important as a means of connecting to our audience and sharing with you. There are any number of things. I'll just give you an example. The number of teams that are on pause are so significant that we simply are a staff of 30 plus, and we cover a lot, as all of you know, subscribers, because you see the emails all the time. But we don't have the bandwidth to be able to do it. And so we want to make sure you know about it. We've been using social media as a means to doing that, And so anyway, long story short, having somebody who's in the editorial process working on social media is something really significant. And it's something I think she's done a masterful job with already. And but Jackie, if you could take me through, what are some goals of yours for where we're headed from a social media perspective? And I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I am really curious.
It's all right. I think you caught me by surprise because I've been live tweeting this entire talk. So that's actually a good transition into sort of how I'm looking to build what we have. So yes, I was live tweeting via the Next Twitter account, specific quotes or main ideas that came out of that ACC discussion. And what that does, in my opinion, is it creates a moment on the internet, and that's part of what we need to do. It's that, okay, we have our stories come out, but how do we expand upon our voice? And so here we have an event, and that's a perfect opportunity to bring that on to social media and find people who share our, I guess, ideology and beliefs and who love women's basketball as well. It's all about finding those people. We've found a bunch, but there's so much more that we can do. So it's knowing what hashtags do we use? Which people do we tag? Are we tagging people too much? Are we tagging people too less? But it's also about looking at our analytics and seeing, okay, how many people are we reaching? It's looking at strategies and troubleshooting strategies and sort of seeing, okay, what are our not peer institutions, but peer publications doing? How do they get the reach that they get? And so that's something that I've been working on in the past couple of weeks and will continue to throughout, the next few weeks, which is putting together all those ideas. So, okay, this peer publication is doing this. How do we at the Next, with what we're about and the type of voice that we want to have, how do we execute? And how do we reach more people?
So if I could jump in on that, because
go ahead.
It's a great point. And, part of our proof of concept is a lot of the work we did at High Post Hoops, where we found that in the first year, we had a certain amount of readership, and then it more than doubled from year 1 to year 2. And so, and again, into year 3. And so when we've come to the Next, to be, fully independent, it's about making sure that that audience that we had cultivated there knows about us. And then also, in addition to that, there were people who never got to High Post Hoops who care very much about women's basketball as well. And so, being on the Substack platform allows us to get to that point where ultimately, if 1% of just the people who read us at High Post Hoops are paid subscribers, 1% every month, that's going to allow us to be in a position to be between hiring some people full time and having other people who are earning what they would get freelance to do this work anywhere else you can imagine, whether it's The Athletic, whether it's the New York Times, at similar rates. And the difference being that the rates we pay will be making the choice to be about women's basketball all the time, and so it's making sure that that is earmarked for what it is that we care about. Somebody, well, I'm inclusive for a long time, is Meg Linehan, over at The Athletic. And Meg has helped to drive a tremendous amount of subscriptions to The Athletic because of her women's soccer coverage. But ultimately, you can't earmark that money for women's soccer coverage. Ultimately, you're limited by what The Athletic can and can't do. And just to be clear, I subscribe there. I made it clear I subscribe because of Meg. And I'm grateful that they've given her that home. It is a relatively small percentage of my total annual subscription that's going to women's coverage. 100% of what we do here goes to cover the women's game. Just like over at the 9, we're going to be covering 5 different women's sports every single day. We're never going to cover men's sports, which is not what we're going to do. And the same is true at the Next. And so when you talk about speaking to our audience, to our segment of the population, there's a lot of us out here who want to make sure that there are permanent homes for women's sports coverage. That's what it comes down to. And that's why I think it's so important when you speak about those analytics. There's so many more people for us to reach. And that's, by the way, to our subscribers too, where so much of this is word of mouth. So much of this is, my best advice to all of you, and I know if you're here and you're reading us, I know it matters to you the way it does to us, is if there's ever a person who ought to know about what we're doing, go ahead and share what we have. I'm a lot less concerned with making sure that, we get every last dollar behind the paywall. There's a reason why we have these subscriber events, but we make sure that our coverage is open to everyone, because we want to make sure that the coverage itself is reaching the widest possible audience too. That's a big part of why we do what we do. And so, to your part of things, letting people know about it and sharing that coverage, more people need to know, is a critical part of our mission. And so, you've stepped up. Now it's just a question of, when you see something that reminds you of why this matters to you, let your friends know, let your colleagues know, so that we make sure that my superstar team can get paid and can get recognized for the work they're doing, because I never cease to be amazed by it. But anyway, so yes, Jackie, that's what you're doing. I'll let you get back to live tweeting what we're doing. Were you able to live tweet your own quotes as you said them?
I mean, I was just
I wasn't going to pass you.
I was just listening. I mean, Mitch could confirm. He's going through all of the tweets that I tagged him in. It's just the moments that I thought were very striking. Talking about who's going to contend and why. But you were pulling my leg, which is okay.
It's a good. No, but yes, that's. I would not be surprised about that. Bria, I want to put you on the spot a little bit, if you don't mind.
Oh, I was actually typing something in the chat, so.
Oh, go ahead.
Great. No, you go ahead. I'm not going to forget. So let's get this over with. Let's do this.
So, Bria did really vital work, and I want to spotlight her really briefly, if I could, without embarrassing her. But so Bria holds the role of managing editor, and we came about that title not accidentally. The mechanics of how we do things, the way we think about what our mission is, how we put that mission forward, how it works on a day-to-day basis. There's not a thing that happens at the Next where I don't talk to Bria about it ahead of time, and where she is not bringing to it better ideas than I have had about the way in which to make this coverage work. And so I'd love for you to reflect, if you could, on what you're most excited about what we've done in 2020, and if there's a thing you are most excited about for what's next in 2021.
The thing I'm most excited about, I think, was the WNBA coverage, because that was a horrible time for me, personally, for all of us, really. But I think what I loved so much was how everyone, the hard work everyone put into it. And I know that's not everything, but just we're doing stuff that people actually want to see and need and appreciate. A lot of people, because I've been in this boot camp and I've been interviewing women's sports fans, and a lot of people mention how they pay for the Next, or they subscribe to the Next because they I want to see women's basketball coverage that's accurate and consistent. So I really am proud of that, because we're still people are going to look back and be this is what happened in the most awful year, women's basketball. Wow, all that. And what I really like also is, I don't know how to explain it, but we're already there all the time. So when something crazy, major, insane happens with the WNBA or women's college basketball, we're already there. So people already know to come to us. We're not one of these just publications that I'm always side-eyeing because oh, now you show up. So that makes me really proud. But 2021,
once you parachute in to talk
yes,
about the domestic violence or the bad story that comes up, and then leave it alone, or the ones who parachute in to talk about how there needs to be more coverage.
I actually don't know which one bothers me more, to be honest. But 2021, I'm really excited about, because I was actually just typing this to you because I owe you a conversation about all the stuff I learned at boot camp about building a new startup. But I'm really excited about that, refining and help continue to build this so we can just grow and stay and sustain. So that's what I'm really excited about. Because like the work and the access and like the things we do are already there, and
Right.
the people that have been covering it just are already just so great and talented. But I'm excited to help us like remain
It's
and
true, right, and grow, right? Right.
Mhm.
I mean, like to your point, we covered hundreds of reported stories out of the WNBA season this year. And of course, we have reporters on all 12 of these WNBA teams, including, noted social media maven Jackie Powell is also our New York Liberty beat reporter. So it's just one of these situations where the work is paramount. And like, what do we have this morning? I didn't even scroll back and see, but we had right, University of Wisconsin had their open postponed, right? So that comes up. Email went out at, I want to say 11:19. Jen Hatfield had popped in Slack at 11:21, as had Nick Niendorf, who covers the Big Ten for us. By 11:21, I tweeted it out. That's just, we're all living it. We're all living women's basketball every day. And so the coverage follows naturally from that. And so I agree with you. I think of it every day as like, all right, we've laid down the marker in a way that has already, I believe, paid dividends elsewhere around the industry. And we've talked about this before, but we've had people who have written for me, have worked with me at High Post Hoops, and the Nats have gone on to bylines lots of other places. There was in SI, there was a Bria Felicien byline, if memory serves. Not sure. Was that you? Was that the same Bria?
that was speaking of. We're changing the subject. So I had a question about conferences, because I feel like the SEC will be like very similar to how it was last year, minus like South Carolina probably won the championship, but that's just my personal opinion. But what league do you feel like, before all the cancellation happens, like just on paper, do you feel like is the most different, looks either improved or just surprised you by how much worse they'll be, either league or team?
Well, so that's a great question. And I will just brief shout out to the SEC reporter, Dorothy Gentry, who's wonderful. Dorothy is on a much needed vacation this week. I'm really excited that she is not here, which I know sounds mean, but I mean it because Dorothy is somebody who struggles to take time off, is constantly on, is constantly working. She was telling me, last Friday was going to be her first day off for a week. And then she's like, but I'm here if you need anything for an emergency. And then she's like, well, if this happens in the SEC, I want to write about that. No, she is constantly doing the good work. We're very excited that she is not doing that work, resting up and giving you amazing SEC coverage. And her preview was fantastic. But that said, yes, the SEC, I think, will look remarkably similar, with South Carolina at the top, Mississippi State's going to be really terrific. I mean, I know it's sort of a cop-out answer, but the Big East is going to be dramatically different because it has UConn, and the AAC is going to be dramatically different because it doesn't have UConn. I will just say, Katie Abramson Henderson is somebody at Central Florida who's building a program that I think is going to continue to be on the rise. I think they will be an AAC power. I think they will eventually fill the vacuum, if not at the UConn level, but a team that's capable year in, year out of winning there as well. And of course, South Florida with Jose Fernandez is a power already. But yeah, I think that's going to be the biggest shift that we're going to see. And the other possible biggest shift is, I think Indiana's the best team in the Big Ten. And I don't remember the last time you could say that, probably never. They set the record for a program victories with 24 last year. I think they'll struggle to beat that this year just because of the total number of games. But I think this Indiana team is extremely, extremely talented. Jordan, we're glad to have you, and thank you for being with us. Yes, we love them all too, and we're glad to see you. I don't want to put her on the spot, Oh, I think she popped out, but she was here briefly, and that was Pepper Persley. And we love Pepper here too, who's done remarkable work covering the league, has been doing a podcast for us called She.Next. And I will tell you guys that I have edited, and we're in the process having Christine Hopkins transcribing Pepper's conversation with Kia Clark of the New York Liberty. It's very good, very interesting. 25, I know, Jackie, you're going to do Kremlinology on it. I know that. I could see that. Oh, I hope we need that face for a meme, the Jackie response to Kia Clark being on Pepper's podcast. But so I don't want to tell you how to do your social media job. You should use yourself in that, not to say. And so that's a very exciting conversation we're going to have coming up as well. But, you know, Pepper's another example of here's somebody who knows the league, who is doing the good work. You know, she's 9 years old. I don't care about that, right? It has nothing to do with how old she is. It has to do with she's somebody who puts in the time, who does the research, who asks excellent questions, and who does the work. And so I reached out to Pepper a few months ago to basically say, listen, what can we do to make sure that her work gets a platform and that she has the opportunity to do it? And what can I do to help provide the sometimes difficult thing, which is to get the access, which should be easier in women's sports than it is much of the time. And so giving Pepper that chance to be able to expand on what she was already doing was a critical part of what we do here at the Next, is making sure that there's a place, there's a home, there's a base of operations for this work. It was something I noticed in my own work when I would freelance at different places, which I still do. And there are great editors, and sometimes editors move on. And there are publications that have ebb and flow. And Mitch, I see you shaking your head, but you know this, right? I mean, it's not in your head, I should say. It is just the reality of this business is building that permanent infrastructure matters. I want to answer, Bria, your question about, yeah, Kim Doss is always in my head too. Kim, who does wonderful work covering the Pac-12 for us. And Spencer Nussbaum, of course, covering the Big 12 as well. You know, the Pac-12 to me is different in the sense that I think UCLA may have the best player in the conference in Michaela Onyenwere. And you combine that with what Corey Close is bringing in as no slight of Ari McDonald, who is extremely impressive in her own right at Arizona. But Arizona, UCLA are two teams that I think are on that same level as Stanford, as all having a real shot at the Final Four before you even get into questions of how Kelly Graves reloaded at Oregon. And Kelly Graves has, I want to say, 78 of the top 100 coming in over the next couple of years. And so, you know, the loss of 3 first-round draft picks to the WNBA is going to hurt Oregon less than, let's say, most other teams would have. And so I think those are the big deals. The Big 12 looks really similar, and Spencer Nussbaum, you guys have seen, had a preview for you guys. Pending, and it's not a small thing, Didi Richards, who unfortunately suffered a spinal cord injury in a collision in practice a few weeks ago. And Didi Richards, who might be the best on-ball defender in the country and is a terrific point guard who's capable of sliding to the 2-3 as well. A prospect, I can tell you, WNBA talent evaluators love. And so, you know, all the best to Didi Richards, who you want to see back for human reasons, but also because she is one of the most exciting players around and someone I'm very eager to see back in action. I'm so excited for this season. I really hope it happens, you guys. I wrote about this last week at the 9. Like, I just keep going back emotionally, back and forth between, because I want everybody to be safe, and that's really important to me. Top to bottom, want the season to happen. You know, there's so much that goes into this, and I don't know what the right answer is, but it's certainly an emotional ebb and flow. that keeps going back and forth. Before we go, because it's 12:50 and I know we got Gino at 1, I want to make sure we got that and report on that for you as well. You guys, subscribers, do you have any questions? You can pop them in the chat if you prefer. You can unmute yourself and ask, but you guys have anything for us? I would give you that question. And that prompt. And in the meantime, I will add the following. The player I am most excited to see this year, the single most excited player I'm most excited to see this year is Aaliyah Boston. I want to see what Aaliyah Boston has done. She told me a few weeks ago, she spent her entire time working on her 3-point shot to add that to what was an elite interior game as a sophomore. Aaliyah Boston is the best WNBA prospect in the country as far as I'm concerned. Do you think this from Laura Ward? Do you think they'll end up going to a bubble format for the NCAA 20? I do, Laura. I think they have to. I don't begin to understand how we could safely have an NCAA tournament that involved travel. I think you have to send teams there. I don't know how you figure out, if you're the tournament committee, who gets seated where. And that's the thing that I keep trying to understand. This is not going to be a season in any recognizable sense. How you seed teams where there's going to be very few common opponents, there's going to be very few ways of understanding outside of conferences how good anybody is. I don't think it's almost like coaches won't have the right to complain about their seeds, which, by the way, spoiler alert, they will complain no matter what happens. But, how do you complain about your seeds when, you can't prove that the committee's wrong and the committee can't prove that they're right? But do I think there'll be something? Yeah, I purely guessing with the understanding that I have given up on predicting the future. It's going to be something smaller than 64, and it's going to be something like 16 teams together. And Lillian, thank you for joining us. This is what we do, so glad to share that with you. I think there'll be a tournament of some kind, hopefully, and an opportunity to play for a championship. But think about what they do now. First 2 rounds in everyone's home arenas. Partly that was done to be able to have a crowd. Well, what are the chances that it's safe to have a crowd by March? Very hard to imagine. Very hard to imagine. So I'm hopeful we have a season. But my best advice to everyone is every time there's a game, enjoy the fact that there's a game. Enjoy the fact that there was safely a chance to have that game, and understand there may not be one tomorrow. I'm a big baseball fan. I've been enjoying Mitch, your Baltimore Orioles bird with the bat. I actually am wearing the KBO champion NC Dinos. I've been a longtime Dinos fan since March of this year, and so it's very exciting.
Lifelong Dinos fan.
That's right, lifelong Dinos fan. But we're a Mets house, and when my older daughter, who's a baseball fanatic, and I watch those games together, we enjoyed today with the idea that maybe they'll play tomorrow, and maybe there'll be a positive COVID-19 test, and they won't play tomorrow. But it's just, we're going to enjoy this. We're going to enjoy this today, and that's where we are. Any last questions before we go? Just, don't want to be late for Gino. All right. Well, I just want to thank everyone here and everyone who's watching this reporting after the fact. You helped make this happen in 2020. There is a 24/7, 365 home for women's basketball coverage because of you, because your demand indicated that it was possible, and because your financial support has allowed everybody who works here to be able to prioritize this work. And so tell the world. We're going to keep telling the world. We're going to keep doing it because we know it needs to happen, and how quickly it becomes sustainable is all based on how quickly those who care about it learn about it. So thank you, all of you. And we'll be talking end of the year wrap up next month as well. So we can't wait to see you, and reach out anytime with any questions you have, We are here for you. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you all soon.